Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We're sponsored by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, as well as the Catholic Apostolate Center. There will be several presenters tonight, including myself. I am Paul Stage, Director of Campus Ministry at St. Xavier University. We've been asked as part of the Mercy conference to be part of this. I'll let everyone else introduce themselves that's presenting today. So, Christine, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Christine Eberly. I'm the Director of Campus Ministry at Gwynedd Mercy University outside Philadelphia.
Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Addington. I'm the Catholic Campus Minister at the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio.
And Sister Sheila?
I'm Sister Sheila Carney, and I work in mission services at Carlow University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Wonderful. And for those who heard just a few minutes ago, later in the webinar, we'll be asking everyone to send in some of the things that you're already planning for the Jubilee Year of Mercy. So feel free to use the chat function to do that, or if you're comfortable, we can pass the video and microphone over to you at that time. That chat function should be in the top right corner, the button to activate it of your screen. All right. Am I the presenter? I think I'm the presenter. Okay, good. So we'll start off. As I mentioned, 3 out of the 4 presenters today are from the Conference for Mercy Higher Education, and we thought we'd just mention a little bit about the conference. We're sponsored by the Sisters of Mercy. There are 16 schools in our network, and what you see in the middle there is a word cloud of our core values. So we're sponsored by an organization that dedicates itself to mercy in the Catholic tradition, and these are just some of the words that we find fulfill that call to living out mercy in the world. At the bottom there is a map of where the Mercy universities are. So if you live near any of those red dots, congratulations, you have a Mercy school near you, or you're in a Mercy school. Many of us are. So feel free to reach out to the campus ministers at any of those Mercy schools. They've been living this charism and breathing this charism and swimming in this charism for their entire career as long as they're in that Mercy school. One of the key points that I wanted to call out in the mission of the Conference for Mercy Higher Education is that our students have a Christian commitment to mercy and justice in the world. We promote hospitality to new ideas and energies, and I think that kind of sums up what we do as Mercy School. So it's just a little introduction to the Mercy Schools, and we're actually going to start our first leg of the webinar with Sister Sheila Carney, who's going to talk about the actual Sisters of Mercy and the charism that they live out. So I'm going to kick it over to Sister Sheila and the Sisters of Mercy.
Thank you, Paul. I was kind of charmed when you said that mercy is the charism that we swim in. That's a lovely image. And I think those of us who work in mercy institutions would all agree that that's our ambiance. It's a charism that goes back to the mid-1800s, to the story of a woman whose name was Catherine Mcauley. She herself was born in the late 1700s to a fairly well-to-do family in Dublin, Ireland. She had a mother and a father, of course, and a brother and sister. Her parents were very, very different from one another. Her father was a devout Catholic with a deep and abiding concern for the poor, and especially for the education of poor children. And Catherine witnessed that in her young life and emulated it throughout her entire life. Her mother, much younger than her father, was much more interested in the social scene in Dublin and wanted her children to grow up in that environment. The result of that was that Catherine, as she made her way through life, was comfortable with all aspects of society. From her father, she learned to be comfortable with people who were poor, and with her mother, she learned to move easily in society. And those things became very important to her as she went on. Unfortunately, her father died when she was very young. She was about 5 years old. And the family went through a number of financial reverses. They lost their home. Her father had owned several small properties in the city. They moved into one of those, lost that, moved into another, lost that, moved in with friends of her mother's, and then her mother contracted tuberculosis. So at that point, the family split up. Her brother and her sister went to one part of the family. She and her mother went to the other, and she cared for her mother for 2 years until she died of tuberculosis. At that point, the family that Catherine was living with also declared bankruptcy, and she decided that the best thing that she could do to help them was to move out. So she went and joined her brother and sister in a household that was very bigoted against Catholics. And it was an extremely difficult period in her life because she was often ridiculed for her beliefs and her practices. But because her mother hadn't kept up their religious practice, she didn't know how to respond to those criticisms, and she felt she was not holding up her faith. Fortunately for Catherine, she's about 20 at this point. Fortunately for her, she came to be acquainted with a couple whose name were William and Catherine Callahan. They were people who had been in India for a long time. Mr. Callahan was an apothecary, we'd call him a pharmacist, with a specialty in herbal medicines. They had no children, and they came back to Ireland because Mrs. Callahan had contracted a chronic illness. They were looking for someone to be a companion for her, and they invited Catherine Mcauley into that role. It was a very significant decision for her because in reality, she ended up living with them for 20 years. And during those 20 years, she helped to maintain their household, to oversee the domestic staff in the household. She began to do what she had seen her father do. She gathered poor children and taught them religious education. She gathered young women in the neighborhood, taught them needlework, opened a small shop where they could sell what they had made and earn some money. And through those years, amassed quite a number of skills. When the Callahans died, Catherine was astonished to find that she was their heir. So at the age of now 43, and having had a pretty unstable life from the time of 5, always depending on others to care for her, to provide shelter for her, food, whatever else she needed, she suddenly had a mansion, a 22-acre estate, and what we calculate to be between $3 and $6 million. So this is an enormous change of fortune for her. What she did with that money was to build a large house in the city of Dublin, in a property very specifically chosen, a very upscale neighborhood, because she intended to run programs for the poor out of that house. And she wanted the needs of those people to be everyday evident to the neighbors who had the resources to help her meet those needs. So she opened a house. She had a school for about 200 little girls. She had a training center for young women coming into the city to seek employment. She took in women who were living in dangerous circumstances, and eventually about 12 other women joined her in that work. They went out into the streets of Dublin to care for the sick in their homes and visited the sick in the hospitals. So they had a thriving ministry going on. One day the bishop came to visit, and he suggested to Catherine that if she wanted her works to continue beyond her lifetime, she needed to give them a more permanent structure. And he suggested a religious community as the appropriate structure. Catherine engaged the women who had joined her in a conversation which ended in a decision to follow the bishop's advice. Catherine and 2 others went to the Presentation Sisters to be formed as religious, and on December the 12th, 1831, they professed their vows. So this Saturday will be our 184th birthday as Sisters of Mercy. Catherine lived for about 10 years after that. In that time, she founded 9 other Mercy communities in Ireland and England. And when she died on November 11th, 1841, there were 100 Sisters of Mercy. In the years since then, between 1841 and 2015, there have been 55,000 women who have chosen to follow the path of mercy in the footsteps of Catherine Mcauley. Presently in the world today, there are 7,000 sisters, and from that one house in Ireland, there are now sisters in 45 countries. There are over 8,000 mercy ministries in the world. Presently, there are 7,000 sisters, about 5,000 laypersons who are associates of the community, and 250,000 people whom we call partners in ministry, who are the people who work in our institutions and minister alongside of us in our efforts to bring God's mercy into the world. When Pope Francis declared the Year of Mercy, or since he declared it, there have been two quotations pretty continually running through my mind. One is Catherine's exhortation to the early community: the spiritual and corporal works of mercy are the business of our lives. And the second, of course, is Pope Francis's statement in Misericordiae Vultus: it is my burning desire that people engage the spiritual and corporal works of mercy during this year. So the Sisters of Mercy have planned together for certain aspects of how we'll celebrate this year. The most immediate is that we have created a prayer service in which will be used all over the world this week as mercy institutions open what we're calling Doors of Mercy in our ministries. And the second is an international year-long reflection process on Aloud, which is, of course, Pope Francis's encyclical on climate. That's been prepared by mercy theologians from around the world, and we're being invited to create small groups of people who will engage that process throughout this year. So we feel like this year was made for us. We're excited for it. We've been planning for it, and are eager to dig into it and to see how it will unfold as the year goes on. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sister Sheila. Thank you especially for sharing the story of one woman who, as you say, has touched the lives of 250,000 or more people in the world today. So it really is a story of mercy. But we're starting the Jubilee Year of Mercy here this week, and that's a little bit about mercy. We want to share a little bit about Jubilee as well. So what is a Jubilee year? Typically, it's every 25 to 50 years. It has a long history. It's scripturally based. But more important, there are some typical themes that most Jubilee years incorporate. So we've put about 4 themes that we want to talk about very, very briefly before we get back to the corporal and spiritual works of mercy and how we can practically live out the Jubilee Year of Mercy, including many suggestions from people that are actually doing this already. So the first theme to look at is celebration. Jubilee years are not meant to be dire, downcast years. This is meant to be a celebratory year. As I said, it's every 25 to 50 years. This is an extraordinary one, which means it's not every 25 to 50 years. It's a little sooner. But it happens so infrequently that we celebrate during the year. We celebrate all the good things that God blesses us with, most especially God's grace in our life. So it's a celebration of our faith. One of the ways that you'll see many people celebrating is to take a pilgrimage. All of life is pilgrimage. It's movement from one place towards another place, hopefully God. And in a Jubilee year, we have many physical pilgrimages. Pope Francis encourages us all to take a pilgrimage this year. Usually, the Jubilee year pilgrimage is to the Vatican, the Holy Doors. This year, there are holy doors. There are supposedly holy doors in every diocese across the world, at least one set. So Pope Francis encourages us all to take a pilgrimage to celebrate our faith this year. So get out, do some movement, and have fun with it. After you celebrate a little bit, the second theme is rest and restoration. Jubilee years are also times to rest. Originally, this was a time to let the land lie fallow, so actually letting our resources rejuvenate, letting God's goodness get back into that which has been depleted. We can take this a little less literally and say that it's a time for us to rest and restore ourselves as well. Like the weekly Sabbath, we dedicate this time to the Lord and finding the Lord in our lives more thoroughly. We reflect. This is a wonderful time to reflect on how our lives are going. Take some time, sit down, grab a blanket and a book, and just think about it. This happens to be a pretty common pose in our ministry center, just sitting in the windowsill, looking out at the trees and reading books. Finally, clear out some clutter here. Restoration is about getting rid of the bad as much as it's about increasing the good. So where are we pulled away from God? What is distracting us? And recenter away from that towards God. Again, you can go on pilgrimage for that. So you can celebrate with your pilgrimage to start with. You can rest and restore yourself wherever you're going, and you can go back out in a celebratory ongoing pilgrimage. The third theme to think about is to return what has been taken. Literally speaking, have you taken anything from another person that is due back to them? Have you borrowed a lawnmower, is the silly example. Take some time this year to give those things back. Go through your possessions, find what is not your possession and return it. Less literally, sometimes we take dignity away from people. Sometimes we rob relationships from the people that we love. Sometimes we're complicit in breaking down of freedom and taking freedom away from people. So how have we aided in those less literal ways of taking from someone? Taking someone's dignity is much more important than taking someone's lawnmower. So if in any way we have robbed one's dignity, this is a time to reconcile with them, a time to return that dignity to them, and a time to heal the friendships, the life that has been stolen. Here, I like particularly to think about what misericordia means. So misericordia is translated from Spanish to English as mercy. But think about the root of the word. Misericordia, the first half, misera, is the same as the root for misery. Cordia, heart. So we think about misericordia, mercy, as feeling the misery of another person's heart. So if in mercy you reach out to another person, you're feeling the hurt that's in their heart. And we seek to aid in that misery. We seek to return dignity rather than end the misery. Which brings us to the fourth theme that we've pulled out, to forgive and to reconcile. This is both a reminder of God's unwavering forgiveness and our call to forgive others. So a Jubilee year is a time to remember that God forgives us unconditionally. And that's what the holy doors are for. I'm sure many of you have heard about the holy doors already. They have been opened in Rome. They are being opened around the world in this week and into next week, and probably, I think, through the year, depending on where you are. But the idea behind the holy door is that they provide indulgences. So if you have sinned, if you have hurt your relationship with God, you're meant to take a pilgrimage to these holy doors, and going through these holy doors with a penitent heart and following up by performing work of mercy and seeking reconciliation is meant to provide that indulgence. It can be for you, it can be for the dead, it could be for a loved one. This is a time when Pope Francis is sending out Missionaries of Mercy. You may have heard about the missionaries. They're granted special accordances as priests who can offer reconciliation. I think that in the United States, it's not as big a deal as it is around the world. But one way or the other, this is a time to free the pardoned sinner from every residue left by the consequences of sin, enabling him to act with charity, to grow in love, rather than to fall back into sin. And that's from Pope Francis's bull starting the Year of Mercy. So the indulgence leads to reconciliation. Remember, we are human, and to be human is to err. We make mistakes. So seeking out where we make mistakes, this year in particular, and seeking out where we can ask for the forgiveness is extremely important. Again, it's relying on God's unwavering forgiveness as much as it's offering forgiveness to those around us. So that's Jubilee in general. Remember, this is a tradition going back to the 1300s with scriptural roots. So it's happened many, many times, many dozens of times. These 4 themes are found in almost all of the Jubilee years. This particular Jubilee year is special. Most of them are, and this one is in several ways. First, the theme of the year. The theme is mercy. This is why we're talking so much about the Sisters of Mercy and the Mercy Charism. Also, most Jubilee years are not dedicated to a theme. Rather, they're a particular year where we focus on those 4 aspects. This year, we focus instead on the particular theme of mercy. A second significant part of the Jubilee of Mercy is to open our hearts to the marginalized. So in a very special way, we're called to go out and find individuals who are hurting, who are at the margins of society, who are incarcerated, who are different than us, really. Find ways to heal those wounds and to make it so that no individual has to feel misery. We're also called to interreligious dialogue. Pope Francis made an important statement saying that, emphasizing that we're to work in mercy, to dialogue with our Jewish and Muslim, especially brothers and sisters, but also those from all faiths. Pope Francis reminds us that our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters share a belief that God is merciful, that mercy is an important part of God's relationship to us. Finally, we are called to focus on the works of mercy, the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. This is where I kick it over to Nate Addington from the College of Worcester. Nate will probably introduce himself, I'm sure, more than capable, but Nate did a particular project at the Campus Ministry Leadership Institute on this exact thing. So we'll talk more about CMLI later, but for now, I'll kick it over to Nate and let him talk about his project.
Well, hi friends. I'm glad that I can be with you tonight to kind of share about some of the things that we have going on here at the College of Worcester. My hope is that maybe some of the things that we're doing can be passed off maybe to you all, and you can steal and borrow some ideas and maybe be inspired to implement some things on your own campus based off some of the things our students have put into action here. A lot of the things I'll be presenting tonight have really come from our students and like the momentum that they've had and the desires they've seen to really see this Year of Mercy kind of, I guess, take off in a new direction. Unfortunately, they're not able to join me tonight, and I'll explain why, because they're actually out tonight doing part of our project that we developed. So I guess the best way that I could put this is I'm very grateful for the structure of the church and for Pope Francis calling for this Year of Mercy, because he's really made my job as a campus minister easier, because in a way he's already set the theme for the year, right? I don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. I could just say, well, this year, we're really going to make sure that we're focusing on mercy. This year, we're really going to reevaluate, what are we doing as an organization, as a college, as a diocese here in Cleveland, to make sure that we're, fitting these goals. And so some students and I, we were at Campus Ministry Leadership Institute, like Paul said, this summer, and we really dived into that topic. And so we decided that we would dedicate our main programming every week to something revolving around the work of mercy. And we'll kind of go into that here in a little bit about, we kind of gave each month each month of the year a basic theme from the corporal works of mercy, and we wanted to take it and spin it a little bit, right? We wanted to put a new perspective on it, and I'll kind of explain that as we go through. So what we started, I had your basic intro things that everyone does on campus ministry every semester. But then in October, we started a discussion series. Our main event every week is a discussion series that revolves around a meal where we bring in either guest speakers or I'll do some teaching lessons. And our first one was called, just that you see the graphic there, A Year of Mercy. And it was a 3-night series where we really kind of try to introduce this way that we're going to approach our programming this year. And each of the nights built on each other in October. We decided that we're going to kind of use October's theme as Clothe the Naked, with each, like I said, each Mercy getting, Corporal Work of Mercy getting its own monthly theme. But we didn't want to just do your typical, have a clothing drive, though we did collect shoes to send to Africa through Souls for Souls. We wanted to use Clothe the Naked as kind of our intro springboard, saying, kind of like, Paul explained, that ability to see where people are lacking. In a very symbolic sense, what are they lacking? Whether they're lacking clothes or lacking dignity. And so we built on this concept of Jesus, the first night, Jesus as the heart of God, the heart of the gospel, and building forward on that into, what does that mean that mercy being at the heart of Jesus' mission? And what does it mean that mercy also then being our mission? The final night was this kind of really springboard intro to what we were going to be doing, this witness to God's mercy, living the corporal works of mercy and all that we're doing going forward in the coming year. And so if we could, I think I have a couple of slides that kind of walk us through our monthly themes. And I want to kind of walk you through those.
Nate, I actually transferred presenter control over to you. So if you see the arrow above your slide, or if you click on the slide itself, you have control.
Okay. So in November, we really moved into the really solid meat of the programming, and we started with Bury the Dead. And this was, I think, I wanted to start with this one because I think it's probably the hardest one for our students to grasp. And so what we did right off the bat is we reached out to as many groups on campus for these different themes that we could collaborate with as possible, so that we were trying to expand our reach on campus. So we did a day of the Dead celebration with our Latino group on campus, Proyecto Latino, which led in, to an invitation to them to join us for another discussion series that we called The Last Things. This was a particularly poignant series of events for us. For some reason or another, we just had a lot of students this semester that were dealing with death in the family or sickness of a loved one. And so we were able to really approach it, I guess, pastorally in a way that the campus was really needing right now. Last year, particularly on campus, was a really rough year. In one academic year, we lost both a student, a faculty member, and a staff member all in the same academic year. And we are a community of around 2,000, so that was definitely felt still reverberating through. So what we did is we did 3 weeks, and this is probably the most theological of all of our months. So we just talked about, the theology behind death and dying, and we brought in a campus minister at Ashland University, Aloud, did a great night on, the liturgical rights and responsibilities, around death and dying. I think so many of our students don't know, what the church envisions for those final days, those final moments, and they really appreciated having the opportunity to enter into that concept of knowing, what the church, envisions for those final moments. What I'm really looking forward to is next semester, because next semester is when we're really getting into some of the more unique twists on the way that we're approaching it. And so I want to share some of those with you tonight. So in January, when people come back, we're going to be focusing our monthly theme on the corporal work of feeding the hungry. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a solid push with an organization on campus that runs out of our campus ministry called Soup and Bread. And Soup and Bread, what it is a group of students who actually close down one of our dining halls on campus every Friday. And the normal hourly staff that works that are actually given the day off, and our students run the entire operation. So our students cook the food, our students serve the food, our students do the swiping of the cards, and that allows us to save a great amount in terms of cost for production. And so the students that come in to eat the food, which is just a very simple soup and bread, all of the money that goes that's in surplus that would normally go for wages or for a meal that would be over and above soup and bread is then collected in an account by the college and is designated to this group to distribute as they wish for various hunger-related charities. And so last year we were able to raise $16,000 that we were able to distribute to both local and regional charities. But we also wanted to talk about, that different perspective, right? Not just those that are literally hungry, but maybe those kind of people that are hungry for change. And so we're going to be doing some different approaches on that, both literally dealing with food. We're going to bring in some great speakers that work with local co-ops and local community-supported agriculture farms, people that grow their own food, but then donate that food to food pantries. So often the people that benefit from the food pantries in our area are only receiving canned goods, which while that's all well and good, we wanted to see what we could do in the area to bring life to those that are trying to bring fresh produce to those in the area. But looking outside of food for those that are really just focusing on things that are hungry for change, hungry for more out there for social justice. I'm really excited because we're going to be partnering with the Office of Minority Student Services on campus, and we're going to be bringing in Bree Newsom to present with our students. That name might not sound the most familiar to you. She's not a Catholic theologian or anything like that. But if you've been watching the news, you might remember her. She was actually the individual that climbed the flagpole in Charleston, Carolina, and brought down the Confederate flag. And so we're going to be bringing her in with the Office of Minority Student Services to talk about the issues of race relations on campus and the issues, some of the things that we're seeing, going on across the country right now. And we're really hoping that can be a great event to kind of like kickstart the semester to say, welcome back. We're ready to really dive into this on a real deep and meaningful level. As we move into February, our transition focuses to visiting the sick. We're going to bring in one of the local pastors here from town, Father Joe Seabauer, who has a real passion for both hospital visits and chaplaincy and hospice care, but we're also, once again, trying to team up with as many different groups on campus. So we have an improv group on campus called Don't Throw Shoes, and we're working with them to go and to spend some time in the Akron Children's Hospital, to actually go and visit the sick, to spend some time with those that are definitely in need of a smile, and our improv group is definitely not short on those. We're hoping to bring in a speaker from the hospital to share with us just kind of the information on what those psychological effects that joy and laughter can have on individuals that are sick. We know that, you look at Francis when he smiles and you can't help but feel that that's contagious. And we're excited to hopefully welcome some speakers from the University of Akron Children's Hospital to share with us some of those psychological science-based findings that they have with us. As we move into March, Shelter the Homeless, we're taking this year somewhere between 10 and 15 students down to El Salvador to work in the COAR orphanage. The Diocese of El Salvador is actually the mission diocese of the Diocese of Cleveland. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary where we have been staffing various parishes and sending people down ever since the Civil War broke out. So this will be our third trip down to join in the orphanage, and we'll actually be teaching English in the school that's connected to the orphanage. We're also doing, once again, another discussion Newman Night series, and we're going to try to put that twist on it, not just friends that are homeless in terms of lack of housing, but those that may be spiritual homeless or even nationally homeless. So we're going to be bringing in speakers to talk to us about immigration reform. Specifically, we have two speakers lined up to come in about the whole issue of Syrian refugees and trying to put a more human face to some of the things that are going out there. If you're on social media, I'm sure you've seen that there are definitely some very hateful and very just anger-based arguments out there. And we're hoping that we can kind of counter some of those by bringing in some speakers to kind of present this in light of, joy and truth and human dignity. Another issue that we're really excited about bringing in is we're bringing in Father Mike Matus, who's a priest here in the diocese, who really does some great LGBT advocacy in the diocese in terms of making sure that our brothers and sisters that do identify as LGBT find inclusion in their parishes, that they don't feel like they're a marginalized member of the church. And so we're once again partnering on campus with the Office of Gender Diversity and Inclusion to sponsor this event to say, you know, you are our brothers and sisters. You are not a secondary part of the church. You are the church. So we're really excited about that twist. Those people that maybe don't feel at home here in the country, or maybe don't feel at home in their own parish. And so we're really, really excited about bringing those speakers in. And then finally, in April, as the semester winds down, Give Drink to the Thirsty. If any of you know Cleveland history, you know we're not exactly known for the cleanest of drinking water. In 1969, the Cuyahoga River actually caught on fire. We're hoping to show, you know, the steps that we've made there. And so we're bringing in some speakers from the Cleveland Clean Water Initiative to talk about what Cleveland's doing to have clean water. And we're hoping to tie in this last series with a strong push with Pope Francis's new encyclical on the environment, and doing a panel discussion with our environmental group on campus and the grounds facilities group, really to say, like, what are we doing to bring these issues to light for the college and for the community. Now, you may think that I've missed a very important corporal work of mercy, but I haven't. And the reason I did not talk about visiting the imprisoned is that this section here was really just, you know, the groundwork for our project at CMLI. The main meat of our project comes in with the conversation we had with our students, which was this. It's centered around the fact that there are a lot of groups on campus that do service, and that sometimes the communication, as you all know, across campus is not always the best. So what would often end up happening is you have multiple groups that would be doing canned food drives or clothing drives at the same time, and they might be going to different organizations at the end, and each group would suffer. And we thought to ourselves, you know, what is a real viable need in the community that isn't being met by any other group on campus? And so the students quickly came to mind that they thought that prison ministry and outreach to the incarcerated was something that no one on campus was even anywhere close to thinking about. And so we started playing with that idea of what it would mean for a group of college students to really try to take on a prison ministry. And so I said, you know, before we do this, we need to make sure that the need is really there, that we're not just thinking like, oh, this would be really cool, that there really is an earnest need. And so as we started doing some research, what we found out is since 1992, the prison rates in Ohio have steadily rose. Last year in 2014, we had 51,729 people incarcerated. Now, that number is very important, that 51,000, is because what you need to realize is that the 28 state prisons in Ohio only hold 38,000. So there's a great problem with overcrowding. What normally happens is those excess prisoners, upwards of 10, 12,000, are housed in local county jails here in Ohio. So oftentimes, inmates that are serving sentences of 1 year or less or are being held in county jails or facilities really aren't designed specifically for long-term incarceration. And so we saw these numbers going up, and we're looking at the numbers in Ohio, realizing that within the next 3 years, almost 90% of all of those inmates that are in prison right now, those 51,000, are either up for parole or going to be paroled. But of those 90% that are up for parole, being paroled, 62% of them are likely to become repeat offenders and move back into the judicial system at some way. And so we realized that the need was definitely there. And the question was, what could we do as college students to help combat that? And so what we did is we approached it, you know, with that great 2 feet of mercy idea. And so I'm really happy that this semester our students have been diving into this, and we've really kind of revitalized our entire service ministry. We started with that concept of charity. You know, we wanted to meet the immediate spiritual needs of those here in the Wayne County Jail. And so what we do is we actually have students that are going in to the Wayne County Jail. They've gone through all the training with the sheriff's office here. They've gone through training with some of our sociology professors that focus on judicial systems and crimes. And we run a Bible study in the Wayne County Jail for any that want to attend. And the students are just overjoyed by, you know, forming those really authentic and genuine relationships with the inmates and the residents there in the Wayne County Jail. I was so proud of my students, though, when they said to me, they said, Nate, if that's the charity, what's the justice? And so I said, that's a very good question. Why don't you build on that? What do you mean by that? And so they said, well, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something more. What about those 60% that are repeat offenders? What do we do to move them out of that cycle? What are the contributing factors that are making them, get back into that cycle? And, we did our research. We're talking to groups in town that do this ministry, this outreach. We've talked to the social department here, the criminal justice department, and we're really seeing that a lot of the root causes is that once people are released, they just don't have the support system to try and, put their life back together. And if they do have the support system, they have such a hard time moving out of these lower levels of poverty. They're released and maybe they don't have a job, and if you're arrested for a smaller crime or you're in prison for 1 year or less, you don't always have the resources in terms of being placed into temporary employment by like a federal system, and so they either lost their job or they can't find employment. And so what we teamed up with a group in town that's called the Behind Bars and Beyond Working Group. It's a group from all kinds of different outreach organizations, and our students have become real active members in that organization. So right now we have students that are staffing 2 support groups that meet throughout each month for returning citizens. So after they've been released, they're invited to these support groups. In fact, we just printed off several hundred postcards to send out to the federal and state prisons of people being released to Wayne County to say, hey, these are resources that are available to you, these support groups. There's always a seat at the table. We'd love for you to come. We'd love to hear your story. We'd love to see what we can do to help you. And we've just had an overwhelming response from people with our students being involved in these support groups. So often, many of the community volunteers that were in the support group were people that were of retired age. And while that's a critical part of it, a lot of those being released are in their 20s and 30s. And so our college students really do play a great role of like a peer mentor for these people. And of course, there are lots of things that have to be considered in terms of safety and things like that. So our students have gone through some pretty extensive training and things like that to make sure that we keep things on the up and up in the support group. And then finally, the part that I'm really the most excited about is we wanted to do something about those issues of poverty and what can we do to move people out of poverty. And so our students came up with the idea of developing a USB drive that would be preloaded with all sorts of resources that someone being released from prison might need, as well as offering classes on how to actually use a USB drive, because some of these people that might have been in prison for, upwards of 20, 30 years, they just don't know basic computer skills. And so we applied for and received a grant to work on our prototype for this USB drive. We're using the support groups as a research base to find out what resources these people actually need. So it's not just us saying, we think you need this and working into it, but actually making sure we know what they need. The part that we're most excited about is that we're working on, we have a programmer who's donated his time to work on a very Wayne County specific based budgeting program, where a returning citizen can input what they make a week, and it will auto-calculate for them based off of Wayne County averages for rent, what they should be spending on rent, what they should be spending on groceries. It can auto-deduct for them restitution payments, child support payments, alimony, things that maybe we don't have to think about ourselves, but are day-to-day realities for those that are returning citizens. We're very excited. The different organizations in the Behind Bars and Beyond group are very excited to use these USB drives in their ministries as resource tools. And we've actually been told by those in the Wayne County Jail that they want to get behind this as well. Our hope is to launch our prototype by the end of next spring semester. We've gotten to a great place where the Wayne County Jail is so excited about this that if the prototype is where they want it to be at, they want to get behind it, and the hope is that we can actually make this part of the Wayne County Penal Code so that anybody, whether it's a state or a federal institution, if you're being released from prison back into Wayne County, Ohio, you'll receive one of our USB drives. And so doing, hopefully by making it part of the code, we can actually make it tax dollar funded. And so we won't have to keep searching for grants. And so these are just some of the projects we're doing here at the College of Worcester for this Year of Mercy. I hope that maybe some of them you could kind of take and maybe use them or steal them in any way you want to implement on your campus. And that's my little spiel. So Paul, if you wanted to hand it off to who's next.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nate. Christine, if you click your little orb button, Nate, you might have to kick control over to Christine, but Christine really has comments on what she's doing at Gwen Mercy as well. So it looks like, Christine, you have control.
Okay. Woohoo. Hi, everybody. So I'm so glad that Nate said at the very end there that he hoped that we would steal his ideas because let me get to the right spot here. I'm not having trouble advancing. Oh, there we go. Because Gwen Mercy definitely did. This is actually the second time that I heard Nate's presentation because we were in the same presentation space during last summer's CMLI, Campus Ministry Leadership Institute. And when Lauren Ducharme, our other campus minister, and I heard this presentation, we turned to each other and said, I think we're going to need to do something like this. And so we have. I wanted Nate to present tonight to make it very clear that this endeavor is not in any way restricted to Mercy institutions. But at the Mercy institution, I think we have a unique opportunity to do the programming, not just from within campus ministry or campus ministry in partnership, but really motivating as many entities on campus as possible to do something with these works of mercy and this Jubilee concept. So here's what we are up to. We came up with a similar schedule, although we're doing all of 2016, so we're doing the four semesters in the spring and then, or 4 months in the spring and 3 months in the fall semester. And we decided to focus on one corporal and one spiritual work of mercy each month. So this is our schedule for the corporal works of mercy. And some of the things, as you will see, are things that we would have been doing anyway. We would be doing a Thanksgiving collection. Somebody would be doing a Thanksgiving collection. Lots of people would be doing Thanksgiving collections in November. But some things are opportunities for professors to highlight certain aspects of their work that they care about for the whole community, things that might ordinarily only be shared with their own students. So one of our professors who teaches the death and dying class is going to hold a forum on end-of-life options, options for end-of-life care in January. And two of our professors who got a mini grant to do a prison nursing study are going to share their research with the community. As one of my favorites, our Mercy Honor Society is going to hold a baby shower for Catholic Social Services under the theme Clothe the Naked, because what's a diaper drive if not clothing the naked? And then we also have our spiritual works of mercy, and again, around the same ideas. Some of these are things that would be happening anyway, like the Martin Luther King prayer breakfast or Take Back the Night. But it also is a chance to think outside the box, as we saw with a lot of Nate's topics. Instruct the ignorant, for example. Our Pride Alliance on campus, our gay and lesbian student group, they're going to be holding some sort of myth-busting educational session in February. And Best Buddies is going to be doing something to focus on sort of dispelling stereotypes around people with mental challenges. So a lot of opportunities to think outside the box. One of our theology professors is going to do something around the concept of forgiving all injuries and what on earth does that mean? Fortunately, she's got until October to figure out what she wants to do with that. So what we did to start off this year, we had a big vigil mass on Monday evening to kick off the year, and we commissioned all the groups that you see on these two slides. Representatives from the group carried these wonderful Works of Mercy banners that might be coming up at a later point in this presentation. They actually sort of accepted the commission to sponsor, to adopt these Works of Mercy for our community in the year to come. But we hope that this is a beginning, not an end, of people taking ownership of the Works of Mercy. Each month we will really commit to well-publicizing what is the corporal, what is the spiritual work of mercy that we're focusing on, and we will probably, through digital boards on campus and email blasts, communicate different ideas about, different spins on, different understandings of these various works of mercy. And we're also going to try to sort of thematically connect them also with a critical concern of mercy each month and a principle of Catholic social teaching each month. So we've got a lot of sort of contexts in which to hold these works of mercy. Let's see. Okay, so that, in very brief ice skating through, is some of what When in Mercy is up to in the year to come.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine, for sharing. Thank you, Nate, for sharing. We're at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern now, but we were led to believe we had an hour and 15 minutes, so I hope everyone else was led to believe that. And we'd like to open it up for a little bit of open forum Q&A. So if you have any questions for any of us that are presenting, or if you have something that you're really excited to share about what you're doing on your campus, this is a wonderful time for that. Feel free to, I think there's a button to raise your hand so that Jay can call on one person at a time. That's in the little box where you can see all the names. It looks like a little hand. Or you can feel free to type your question or your comments into the chat box. So does anybody have anything that they'd like to share or any questions that they'd like to ask?
Cue the Jeopardy music.
Is there any hands up, Jay?
I do not see any at the moment.
All right, well, since I shared more about what Jubilee is and what we were doing on our campus, I can share a little bit of what we are doing, just briefly. And if anyone wants to share, feel free to raise your hand or type your question or comment in, and we'll get right to you. Otherwise, we'll move on to our closing and wish you all a happy night. So one of the things that we're doing here on our campus is to focus specifically on forming our student leaders. We're largely a commuter campus, and so it's difficult for us to reach out directly to the 5,000 or so students on our campus. Instead, we're reaching out to the students that do come in leadership roles. We're providing them with training and experiences around the Jubilee year, around the Corporal Works of Mercy, so that they can then go out and share that with other students on campus. We actually formed a retreat around the theme. So we created a retreat where we're bringing 16 of our students off campus to a retreat center, and we're going to set them in experiences of forgiveness and reconciliation and celebration, experiences where they can live out the works of mercy, the corporal, the spiritual works of mercy. And we're going to provide them with directed reflection time where they can learn how to do this with others. So my campus unfortunately missed the CMLI, Chemist Ministry Leadership Institute, and we're a little behind Christina and Nate. So we're kind of doing a thing similar to what they did at CMLI, but halfway through this year and at the beginning of the actual year. So I see a couple of questions coming through. So Greg asks, what recommendations would you make for public or secular institutions and how campus ministry can incorporate the works of mercy, especially when there is not institutional weight or charism? That's a wonderful question. I know I've been at a Newman Center before, but Nate, you're at a private institution. Would you want to work towards answering that question, or?
Yeah, I think the way that we're combating that, the College of Worcester was founded by the Presbyterians, but we have been largely secularized in the last 20, 30 years. And the way that we're really trying to combat that is just by doing as many co-sponsoring with different organizations where, you know, we can get our message out without necessarily having to, you know, present it as church teaching. So those, you know, issues where we're, you know, talking about co-sponsoring with the Office of Minority Student Services, or, you know, the Latin American group on campus, inviting classes from different departments to join us, you know, doing recruitment for our spring break service trip to El Salvador in the Spanish department, and doing as many areas where you could just reach across campus. Father John Grace, when he was at Virginia Tech, you know, he told me one time, he said, the greatest lesson I ever learned was not to have turf wars, and that other people on campus can do, you know, really the work of campus ministry without realizing that they are. And we've really tried to embrace that, you know, I don't think that, you know, the Office of Minority Student Services considers bringing in, you know, Bree Newsom, a part of campus ministry, but it really does fit right within the message of mercy and that concept of, for, you know, those that hunger for righteousness and things like that, and looking for those on the fringes of society. So for us, that's the way that we combat it, is we just try to co-sponsor as often as we can.
Christine, anything you want to add?
One other thing that just occurred to me from my own Newman Center days, it could be fun to give out Works of Mercy awards in the year ahead to entities on campus that you spot doing good things around various works of mercy. Again, the, you know, no turf wars concept.
And Greg, I'm currently at St. Xavier University, which is a Catholic university, but before this I was at a Newman Center in North Carolina, and it was very important for us to be part of the Interreligious Council. So there were many other faiths present on the state campus, and we worked very closely on several large events through the year. So I think if I was still there, the Year of Mercy would probably be one of those where we could work towards mercy, even though our Christian and non-Christian brothers and sisters aren't particularly celebrating the Year of Mercy. I think they could get behind the acts and see some of this stuff come out. So, wonderful question, thank you. Any other questions that anyone would like to ask? Or any other stories that anyone would like to share? Okay, I think we'll leave it open for further questions, but we'll move on. Jay, it looks like you have control, so never mind. So we've mentioned several times the Campus Ministry Leadership Institute, and Christine was wonderful enough to be a very integral role in this. So Christine, do you want to talk a little bit about CMLI?
Sure. So I was on the CMLI team for the last 7 years and have finished my tenure, but Nate is coming on board, has come on board, and Paul is a lucky duck whose school is going to be the host school for this summer. So CMLI, very in brief, is a 5-day training and working institute that takes place in the summer. It moves around the country. It is for teams of campus ministers who attend with their student leaders. They receive leadership training, networking opportunity, wonderful prayer experiences, and probably most importantly, an opportunity to work on a project that they have chosen ahead of time. And you get about 12 uninterrupted, not consecutive, but 12, because that would be awful, but 12 uninterrupted hours of project planning time and guidance around the project plan to work on something with your students. And we all know how tough it is to get the right people around the table for the right amount of time with their heads in the right place. So CMLI is great about that. Nate used that time last year to work on this, Works of Mercy project, and Gwynedd used the time to work on our Popapalooza weekend when many people, several people on this call, came to Gwynedd to see the Pope at a distance.
Some of us were very close to him. As Christine said, I'm lucky enough to be hosting CMLI at St. Xavier University next year. So we're in Chicago, Illinois. We're happy to have as many people as can come. This is a little bit of information about the Institute itself. So you can write down the dates and the website. It's through the USCCB website, usccb.org/campus-ministry-leadership-institute. Their information is not updated yet for this upcoming year, so watch in a month or two, maybe less, but definitely a month or two for information to come out. And registration is due in May, so there is lots of time left. But like I said, we'd be happy to have anyone. And having gone 3 years ago, I really can say it was a wonderful time, not just from the mouth of somebody running it.
And I would also add, it's possible that the registration fee will be a tiny bit higher than that, but not terribly. And that CMLI is sponsored work of the USCCB, but our funding comes very strongly from the Catholic Apostolate Center, and the Catholic Extension also provides generous, thanks Paul, very generous scholarship support for teams coming from mission dioceses. Wait, I see a question. Greg asks, how many students are needed for a team? That is a great question. I have seen it happen with one campus minister and one student leader. We don't recommend that. It has worked with 2. It has worked with 8. So the important thing is to get together students who can productively work together on whatever project you have chosen. And you can pick the project first, or you can pick the team first. You can go in either order.
Last chance to raise your voice in question or comment. Okay, Pope Francis has put out a prayer for the Jubilee year. I think it'd be nice to recite the prayer. I'll put it up here on the screen, and everyone is welcome to read it aloud as we go along. I do recommend muting your microphone so that we don't get 12 people overlapping one another and confusing ourselves. So here's the prayer for the Jubilee year. Lord Jesus Christ, you have taught us to be merciful like the Heavenly Father, and have told us that whoever sees you sees him. Show us your face, and we will be saved. Your loving gaze freed Zacchaeus and Matthew from being enslaved by money. Save the adulteress and Magdalen from seeking happiness only in created things. It made Peter weep after his betrayal and assured paradise to the repentant thief. Let us hear, as if addressed to each one of us, the words that you spoke to the Samaritan woman, if you knew the gift of God. Lord Jesus Christ, you are the visible face of the invisible Father, of the God who manifests his power above all by forgiveness and mercy. Let the church be your visible face in the world, its Lord, risen and glorified. You willed that your ministers would also be clothed in weakness, in order that they may feel compassion for those in ignorance and error. Let everyone who approaches them feel sought after, loved, and forgiven by God. Lord Jesus Christ, send your Spirit and consecrate every one of us with his anointing, so that the Jubilee of Mercy may be a year of grace from the Lord, and your church with renewed enthusiasm may bring good news to the poor, proclaim liberty to captives and the oppressed, and restore sight to the blind. We ask this of you, Lord Jesus Christ, through the intercession of Mary, Mother of Mercy, you who live and reign with the Father and the Holy Spirit, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all again for participating. My understanding is that Jay will have this available online to watch again if you care, or if you care to share it. It will be on the Catholic Apostolate Center website. I'm sure it will be on Empowered Campus Ministries website and likely the Usccb page, so I'm sure you can find it somewhere. My name is Paul Stage, and on behalf of myself, Christina Everly, Sister Sheila, Nate, Jay John, the Catholic Apostolate Center, Conference for Mercy Higher Education, and all sorts of other folks, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.